Issue 23. After the disappointment that was the previous issue, I'm really eager to get to the next one to give myself a more enjoyable read. Sally scolds Sonic because he's supposed to be looking for berries and not dancing. Why do his friends think he's intentionally dancing when he clearly has an anxious look on his face? His so-called dancing is throwing up dust, and it's revealed that some ants got into his shoe, which was making him itch. There's a visual gag where the farmer ants are literally dressed up in farmer clothes that they have for some reason, and it's revealed that Rotor was keeping them as pets, and wasn't sure how they had escaped. So I guess he must have a really flimsy ant farm then. This is never explained, by the way. Sonic has a good point in asking what the point of keeping ants as pets are. The whole point of a pet is to have an animal you can safely show affection to and be given affection back in return, in exchange for taking care of them. Those animals this tiny and whatnot, it's all take and no give because you can't expect any affection from them, you can't pet them at all. That's the worst pet ever. Utterly fails at its job as a pet. Rotor, of course, explains that he just likes observing them. I like how this is a callback to the last time Rotor was shown to have an interest in ants. Earlier on in the comic he wanted an ant farm, and now the plot point is being used to develop some more on because he actually has one now. I love this continuity, the fact that they're remembering even these small things and bringing them back. It feels like both a reward to me for having read the earlier issues, and a display of passion from the writers that they actually remember this stuff and bother to bring it back. This is something that the stories of the games are definitely missing. Sonic points out that if the ants like the ant farm so much, why do they want to escape? Well, you'd think they wouldn't be able to tell the difference until they could escape. But at that point, they're escaping their home, their family, so why do it? Because they're too close to Robotropolis, Sally wants to hurry Sonic in getting those medicinal berries that Sonic somehow hasn't gathered in a second at the speed of sound already. Seriously, didn't the earlier issues keep making a big deal of all the different ways Sonic's speed helped his life? And now he seems to have forgotten he has it. Suddenly, Eggman shows up with a portable roboticizer, which is totally not an overpowered tool for the villains at all, although it certainly succeeds at being a very tense threat. And I guess that's all that matters to Sonic stuff. Fuck logic, we've got emotions to cause. Well, that is action movie logic, I guess. I don't watch action movies. So that fits Sonic thematically. Eggman's about to shoot Rotor because he's distracted looking for ants and somehow hasn't heard the commotion yet. This is another Big the Cat moment for him. What is he, almost deaf? He cares more about finding his ants and avoiding being roboticized? He thinks he can find them all fast enough before getting away? I know he's the absent-minded genius, but he's not completely senile. The absent-minded genius thing kind of works better with the senile old man, because otherwise, well, he's not shown to be a cloud cuckoo lander per se, just immature, so he just looks stupid here. But before anything can happen, everyone is sucked up by a tube from above that showed up just now. I really like how when Sonic tries to make a pun, diminishing the tension of the situation in Leash style, he's shot down being told, "Not funny, Sonic." Now if only those words were uttered in the games. See, that's self-awareness. It makes perfect sense of Sally to say that in that situation because there's no time for joking around. Well, it sounds like it'd be Sally anyways. I don't see why people complain that the lines in Sonic comics are interchangeable between every character. Because I could easily figure out that that was Sally without even seeing her. Why did Eggman think this whole thing was Sonic's fault? At least Sonic lampshades his ridiculous paranoid assumption. Suddenly, before Eggman tries to jump down the vacuum tube, expecting to not die from the fall apparently, he's grabbed by a giant metal alien, who says everyone's going to stay with him forever, basically using them as ants on an ant farm. I don't really have a problem with aliens being in Sonic because it's always been a mixture of sci-fi and fantasy anyways, with the sci-fi part being like the engineer characters. So it makes perfect sense that there would be aliens in the Sonic universe. Why wouldn't there be? There's other dimensions, like blazes. It sure is unfortunate that he happened to choose them of all people though. Why couldn't he have chosen like literally anybody else in that giant planet of theirs? Although, when you think about it, if none of them ever got away from him, the world would have kind of been a better place, because Eggman and Snidely would have never returned to Mobius to cause trouble. And sure, it sucked that the Freedom Fighters were away, especially because there are technically other villains than them out there, but at least the main threat to the planet would be gone. Although, of course, there would still be people roboticized, and the cure for roboticization wouldn't have been made yet. But Eggman and Snively would have been gone. Eggman tries to convince the alien to let him go by giving him a book on himself. A book that is obviously looking too tiny for the alien to read, so Eggman's kind of being an idiot here by thinking he'll be able to read it in the first place. But obviously the people who were interested in ant farms wouldn't want to replace that with reading a book on ants. I'm sure they would like to read a book, but not replacing the experience of watching the ants. But nice effort though. Sure is, well, not convenient, but it's kind of weird that he had that book in his pocket with him. Does he always carry it around because of his ego or something? The alien says an infuriating line of nerve-caliber racism, calling them an inferior species for arbitrary reasons. And now Sonic and Sally do the stupidest thing ever. They save Eggman's life by lying that he's a freedom fighter they need him for survival. Why the hell? What's wrong with them? I guess their logic is they'd feel terrible for the rest of their lives if they were complacent letting someone die. But that someone is Eggman. Where's the logic there? Letting him live makes you responsible for everything bad he's going to do next. Which is a million times worse than just letting him get what he deserves. The alien says that his species is trained to live alone in space rather than being interdependent. I like how absolute bullshit on that being possible, and most of those spaceships have unbreakdownable self-repairing mechanisms, and an infinite supply of medical technology, and an automatic effective doctor for any medical emergency. You know, all the things you need to rely on other people for. And even then, his species must be reliant on other members of the species to build those spaceships for them, unless they have automatic spaceship building factories, who build those factories, or unless they force other species, but you know what I mean. No species can survive all alone. What if you get hurt and need someone to take care of you because you can't even get to the bathroom by yourself? Do they have robot servants, which are never actually seen around the alien in this issue? At which point, honestly, I don't think it really counts as living alone. You're still dependent on a being, sentient or not. Not to mention, the species needs other members for reproducing or they'd go extinct. So they are still interdependent. Even if they were all made up of test tube babies, they'd still be reliant on scientist members of their group or whatever for making and handling the test tube babies, because it's not something anyone could do alone. I just can't believe this concept is possible because it makes no sense. Not to mention, again, the fact that solitary confinement is a punishment for a reason. You'd go crazy without someone to talk to. Although, I don't think that's ever been tested with the person in solitary confinement having, like, books and TV and video games. Maybe it's just boredom that's the punishment. No one ever tested that. I guess the species doesn't have that social needing problem, but still, it makes no sense. So everyone gets placed in a perfect replica of the Great Forest that he was able to make for some reason. And Sonic at least makes a smart effort to try to escape by trying to spin dash through the glass with Dome while the alien's back is turned trying to get food for them. Why does he think he's properly observing them in their normal lives if he's the only way they're going to get food? That's not observing them in their natural environment then. I mean, we never see them get food naturally. Two things have come to my mind here. One, is Eggman going to go crazy from being unable to take over the world here and only being able to just try to kill the freedom fighters as an ultimate goal? I mean, like if he stayed here for too long. And even after that, then what? If they were to remain in here for too long, well, I think the freedom fighters might be fine, but Eggman would drive himself nuts without a place to rule over that isn't entirely populated by people he wants to kill. And the second thought I had is, if the alien really wants to observe how they're living, he doesn't need an ant farm. With his technology, can't he just spy on the world with cameras and satellites and zoom technology? That'd save him the trouble of going to collect people and having to keep them alive. Also, how psychopathic is he to want to keep an ant farm of people who can talk to him? Whether he thinks they're inferior or not, they are still people who can talk to him. Ant farms are only accepted because the ants can't beg us to let them go. Although again, they don't know the difference. Which makes the story trying to have Rotor learn a lesson about the immorality of ant farms feel really hamstrung. And of course, maybe that was the point, but it makes perfect sense that he'd be feeling this way, and I like that. It makes them more sympathetic and relatable, but the overall message is incorrect. A sentient species collecting another sentient species versus someone having a pet. It's apples and oranges. A few days later, Sally nags Eggman about not helping them with work. And Eggman characteristically complains, "Work? Do I look like a slave?" And Tails makes a fat joke, I guess purely from Sonic's influence, because it seems out of character for Tails to do that. Especially hypocritical since he's teasing someone about how they look, when he looks quite different from every other fox out there. But somehow, I guess, he hasn't had experience with being mistreated for that. Okay, whatever. Sally's chopping wood and Sonic's digging a hole. Gee, I wonder why. Why hasn't Eggman tried to kill the freedom fighters yet, since that's his only ultimate goal? I mean, his other ultimate goal was... No, he already took over the world. Sonic points out that the alien might get very suspicious if Eggman doesn't try to act like one of them. And I like how it actually scares him and intimidates him into working. How the hell does Eggman already know about the just now introduced Freedom Fighter Oath, and is able to recite it by heart? Or is he just making it up? No, he can't be, because he's insulting himself by the end. And you think that insult describing himself would have made it obvious to the alien eavesdropping that he's their enemy, and he's not a natural part of their lifestyle for him to be with them. Although I don't entirely see why he would care. He's just a stalker who likes spying on people. Why'd he care anyways? It looks like the alien's right there, so he should have been able to hear Sonic saying that he's not really part of the group normally, and had him busted. But instead, we cut to the evening instead of Eggman being punished. I guess he really doesn't care. Why would Tails ever think sleeping on top of a tree branch here is a good idea? It's not like he's protecting himself from any ground animals that would hurt him. All this is going to do is risk him falling off in his sleep and hurting himself, potentially dooming him if he has an injury requiring a hospital trip that the alien wouldn't care to give him. And not to mention his hands and legs and tails are hanging, which would mean more of his blood would be going to them, kind of creating a circulation problem. Anyways, Sonic says he understands what Rotor said about everyone in this dome being just like his aunts, who have probably all died of starvation by now if Rotor was the only one providing them with food and has been gone for a few days. Except they haven't since fuck logic. Sonic realizes that maybe if they all stopped being interested in Karahine the alien, he wouldn't want to watch them anymore. Wouldn't he just kill them instead of going to the trouble of sending them home? Sonic's desperate, sure, but this could be too risky. And how could they even know what's not interesting in someone they barely know in the first place? They're not really acting interesting now, and he's still not tired of them. Sonic's idea is that acting too uninteresting will at least cause him to open up the top of the tank they're trapped in. Okay, that makes sense. Whether he'd be trying to kill them or return them home or make their lives more interesting for himself, he'd have to open up the top anyways. Rotor has a good point asking how they'd escape the tank and get back down to Mobius, which the spaceship has conveniently not gone really far away from yet for some reason. And Eggman says to leave that to him, because there's plenty of materials for him to invent stuff and tools for that purpose and a perfect recreation in the Great Forests. Lots of metal around, right? I'm guessing there will be through the power of plot convenience. Eggman makes a plan to build a vehicle to escape and have Sonic distract the giant, as he tends to do to robots. And then Eggman will operate his weirdly named spaceship that's hard to pronounce and fly them all back to Mobius. Naturally, Sonic asks why he should trust him. Eggman obviously only wants himself and Snively to get back to Mobius, and maybe not even Snively. But instead of logically saying that he has no choice and I'm all you've got, he just says he's a freedom fighter on his side. Sonic pretends to be dead to get the alien to examine him, and Sonic immediately runs up his metal sleeve. How uncomfortable and heavy must solid, rigid metal clothes be to wear? Not to mention a giant waste of metal. We use fabric for clothes for a reason. Anyways, he runs all over his uniform that is the same color as his skin, making it just barely look like he's wearing clothes at all, and makes him itch all over as a callback to how Sonic was itching from ants at the start of the story. I guess that's where he got the idea from. It's like a Chekhov's gun. And this creates a distraction for the freedom fighters to escape. And Eggman promptly gives the robot what he deserves by stepping on a button to send him into space, because Eggman was watching him operate his control panel, and there was a button to send people into space for some reason. That sure was convenient. Also, why is he bothering to ask for help when no one's going to help him? This is exactly what I meant when I said that every species is interdependent in some way. He needed someone else in his ship in case something like this would happen. If a species even so much as thought they weren't interdependent, they get sent to extinction because of this from their artificial stupidity. And unfortunately, the freedom fighters whine and lecture Eggman about giving a villain what he deserved, with Tails and Sally showing absolute hatred for him and saying he's no freedom fighter for doing the right thing. Of course they're arbitrarily against killing, because that's the entire reason they haven't won over Eggman a long time ago. If they were smart enough to realize it was fine to assassinate him, then there would be no comic, because Sonic would have just spin dashed him to death in the first issue. But still, I could go without the grating moral lecture that's entirely about black and white morality, please. Besides, if the alien was still around, they never would have been able to commandeer the ship and get back home because it would have stopped them from doing so. Really, the only problem I have with what Eggman did is that Sonic went to space with the alien. That's the problem. That's what they should be focusing on. Rotor says that apparently the uniform protects the alien from the conditions of space somehow, for convenience's sake. So what, it's a spacesuit? Now I don't see an oxygen mask, or... Oh, he does have one now. Good credit to the artists. But it came out of nowhere. So Rotor saves the alien, and for some bizarre reason, the alien was taught a valuable lesson and decides to conveniently bring them back home instead of killing them. Because fuck logic. He says, it was me who was the inferior being for the way I treated species different from my own. This is heartwarming, but also very arbitrary, so it's not as satisfying as it could be. Sonic naturally asks to have Robotnik and Snively dropped in a puddle of toxic slime when they returned home, which they survived for some reason. Either that or he didn't do it at all. You know, I really wish I could have seen that as, like, karma, but guess not. How did Sonic know that this wouldn't kill them? Whatever happened to the bullshit about the freedom fighters never wanted to kill their enemies? Whatever. And predictably, the issue ends with Rotor freeing all of his ants, and the ants scratching all of his friends, I guess as revenge, even though ants aren't sentient, so why would they think to want to do this instead of just going away? I guess this is the proof that Rotor wasn't supposed to think that ants should be freed. After this, and a short story with dialogue that we'll never know what the canon dialogue is because it's all written by kids with alternate versions of it. So I guess no point in talking about dialogue because it's all non-canon anyways. Why'd they waste valuable pictures on something non-canon anyways? What a waste! It's basically Sonic and Tails on a fishing trip in the summer, and they get attacked by robot whale Robotniks and they win over it. The next story is the real second story. Antoine finally shows that he cares about Tails and can be a good friend to him, after having done nothing but occasionally insult him at this point. By agreeing to go to Robotropolis despite his fear and the obvious danger it presents to him, just to find a power ring that Tails lost on a mission for some reason. I guess power rings are way more rare in this universe of Sonic, since you can't just, I don't know, go to Green Hill Zone to get 10 million of them. So Antoine has a house, rather than him and Bunny living underground? How has Eggman not spotted this house and them walking out of it with satellites from above and destroyed it yet? I thought they lived underground to make it a lot easier to hide from him. Fortunately for Antoine not getting captured from his idiocy and pride, Bunny finds out what happened and decides to follow him and repeatedly save his life with her super strength, while somehow staying out of sight the whole time. This includes her effortlessly foiling Robotnik and Snively in the process. This is really showing how competent Bunny can be, almost as competent as Sonic, and she was allowed to help out and take action. But instead it seems to be always Sonic, while Bunny, the only other competent fighting one, just sits on the sidelines and is lucky if she's allowed a single line. Antoine's dialogue really makes it obvious how stupid it is that characters talk to themselves out loud all the goddamn time. Especially in a comic where there's no reason he couldn't have had his dialogue in thought bubbles. It would have taken not that much more effort, instead of arbitrarily saying them out loud during a covert mission and risking being overheard and found out. This isn't like a TV show where you have to worry about putting an echo effect when someone's thinking, so it might be like a budget thing. Because he's talking to himself instead of more logically just thinking, his dialogue is even more grating and ridiculous as usual. Especially since He just talks so much. What is the point? But at the end, Antoine manages to find what he was looking for, and is responsible and humble enough to admit that he was being irresponsible and warn Tails to never do that, and Tails and him agree to keep the whole thing a secret. A heartwarming moment between the two. And just when you start to question why the hell Antoine had been oblivious and not suspicious the whole time of all those conveniences happening for him, Antoine gives Bunny a kiss on the cheek as a heartwarming thank you for her efforts. I think he's still planning for Sally a couple times later on in the comic, but this is definitely the start of something special. A sweet relationship full of charm that adds some more heart to, and strengthens the bond of the freedom fighters. The one of Antoine and Bunny. The issue was written by Angelo. Good, I'm glad it's not just one writer and other writers are still being given a shot. The first story, I really liked it. I love the fascinating concept of it. Although Rotor learned the wrong lessons, since ants are non-sentient, dumb little insects who shouldn't even care that they're in ant farms. So it sucks that this is implied to be the whole reason the story happened, to teach him that lesson. I'm kinda confused that Rotor says he's no genius when he clearly is. But I guess that's what makes him humble, and also absent-minded. And saving Eggman's life was by far one of the stupidest mistakes the freedom fighters have ever made. I also hate how Eggman was lectured about trying to get rid of the alien, who was looking completely unlikable and irredeemable by this point, since the only real problem with it was that Sonic went with him, and magically didn't die from being sent into space. At least show him hiding in the uniform of the alien that protects him from the vacuum of space. I guess we were just supposed to assume that? If there wasn't enough space in the comics to illustrate it, have someone say it. That's why the dialogue in comics have characters describe what's happening in front of them in the first place. So there were things that irked me about this story, but for the most part, I really enjoyed it and the premise of it. Even if they really should have just let Eggman get his punishment. Also, they don't use Snively at all as a character. He's just there. So it feels like we're missing out on something. And the other story is a pretty charming and heartwarming story. And for once, aside from Antoine talking out loud for some reason, I don't have any complaints. If it weren't so short, I'd say this was the best story in the comics so far, from how little flaws it actually has. It's almost perfect. I love the Antoine and Bunny relationship already. I love how she's blushing and all shy and stuff. It'd have sucked if she didn't appreciate it and slapped him instead. It's a shame they're sticking with the almost pointless, ongoing problem of Antoine being jealous of Sonic and Sally instead. Or at least apart from what I remember. Because since Antoine's not allowed to be anything other than a hopeless suitor because Sonic's a Gary Stew, it's ultimately a part of their rivalry that goes nowhere. So because he's a hopeless suitor, it doesn't give Sonic a better reason for hating or bullying Antoine. Which, by the way, the bullying hasn't happened in a while. So I really have to compliment the comic for that. Maybe they finally got a clue and realized Sonic was being a bully and the whole situation was just unsettling. Maybe Sonic went too far and really hurt Antoine and realized he had to stop. I wish the comic would have shown that at some point to have a proper conclusion to why he started going more easy on him. But anyways, great issue. Glad I read it.